the space race. We had to do catch-up. Fact is, the Russians or the Soviet Union put a man into space 3 weeks before Alan Shepard. And Yuri Gagarin actually orbited the Earth one time. All we could do with Al Shepard was go straight up, spend about 5 minutes in space, tip over, and come down and land in the ocean. We did not have a rocket booster powerful enough, safe enough to put an American into orbit. So we didn't even accomplish what the Soviets did only 3 weeks before. Al Shepard's flight was a grand total of 15 minutes, 20 seconds, from liftoff to splashdown. It wasn't until February of 1962 that we put John Glenn into orbit on top of a ballistic missile called the Atlas, which at the time, in fact, at the time that Al Shepard went up, the Atlas was only successful about 40% of the time. Did we really want to stick a man on top of a ballistic missile that was only successful 40% of the time? I think not. So we were playing catch-up for 3 years. Finally, by about 1967, we were at a point where we were actually pulling ahead with the Gemini program. We were pulling ahead of the Soviet Union. The first manned mission to the moon was in December of 1968. The mission was Apollo 8. The mission was going to originally be a full dress rehearsal of a moon mission without going to the moon. We were going to be using the Saturn V booster with the Apollo, the command module, and a lunar module, but only in Earth orbit because the lunar module had never been tested in space. So this was going to be a full dress rehearsal. The problem is that the lunar module was not ready. It was way behind schedule. It wasn't going to be ready to take into space and put 2 men in and separate from the command module, fly on its own. They might have lost the crew. What happened was, by about June or July of '68, the CIA had gotten photographs of a Russian rocket on the launch pad. That was going to be their moon rocket. And it was almost as powerful as the Saturn V, if not more powerful than the Saturn V. What we were afraid of is that the Russians were going to shoot men to the moon, or at least 1 or 2, possibly 3 cosmonauts to orbit the moon and come home. We didn't want that to happen. Since the lunar module was not ready, they changed the mission of Apollo 8 to a lunar orbit and a test of the command and service module in deep space. So, in December 1968, we launched Apollo 8 on Saturn V. It flew to the moon, and on Christmas Eve, it went into orbit. It orbited the moon 10 times. And Frank Borman actually read from Genesis, the first verses of Genesis, which talks about the creation. God made the heaven and earth, and he spoke that while they were in lunar orbit, sending pictures back to Earth. It was Apollos 10, 11, 12, 14, 15, 16, and 17. Well, 13 also went to the moon. It just didn't land like it was supposed to. So there were actually 9 missions. I got a math problem for you.